Boker Tov, everyone. Rabbi Eric Solomon in Raleigh, North Carolina. Cold morning here, election day. It's a quick morning Torah in honor of this day. So this week's Parshat Vayera in Genesis there are many stories in it, but the most famous one of them all is the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. And the story many of us know well, but the quick summary is Abraham gets the interpretation. He believes God gives him the commandment to bring his son, Yitzchak. He has two sons, Yitzchak and Ishmael, but he believes it's Yitzchak, up to a mountain and to sacrifice him to God. And in that famous story, Abraham is about to bring up the knife to slaughter his son, the Machelet, and an angel comes through and says, Abraham says Hineni, a few times actually, and stops Abraham as he's about to sacrifice his own son. This is what he understood. And then instead sacrifice a ram, which goes into another story about shofar and Rosh Hashanah, but leave that to the side. The main thing is it doesn't happen, thank God. And instead, a ram is given a sacrifice, and then the father and son, Abraham and Yitzchak, walk down the mountain. And what I want to focus on here is that Sarah Imenu, Sarah, the mother and wife, who struggled to have a child. We presume, here's this story, and from the Torah, it's from silence, because we don't know exactly what happens, but there are many midrashim and commentaries talk about this, that soon after Sarah dies. So first of all, we don't hear anything from Sarah, and then the next parsha is called Chayei Sarah. It's about the death of Sarah. So, Rashi makes this commentary, other ones make this discussion, Hasidic commentators say, basically, what we presume is that when Sarah became aware that her son was almost murdered by her husband, it didn't happen, but it almost happened, her soul just left her. And she died. Of devastation, of shock, of anxiety, trauma, basically. Which is a terrible ending and tragic unto itself, and shows the real-life consequences of Abraham's either misinterpretation or God's demand, however you want to say it. This whole dynamic has real-life consequences on Sarah and what happens after. It's not just what happens in the moment, it's what happens after. So why do I bring this Torah here? I've been pretty plain about my opinions about this election, and I think very strongly that our president has disqualified himself for election for many of the things that he's said and done, particularly regarding racism, issues around, in my view, inspiring anti-Semitism, things of division in our country, and not to mention his policies, but just based on the way he speaks and incites, the way he's handled the pandemic or not handled it. I feel very strongly that the president has acted in extraordinarily poor fashion and beneath the presidency, especially in these last days. The way he's talked about violence is unpresidential on every level. And our country is extraordinarily divided. In some ways, we are walking up today the mountaintop, and we are deciding, are we going to sacrifice one another over this election? Or are we going to just vote on the election? It feels like there's a sacrificial aspect that whoever wins, whether it's the candidates I want or not, it feels it's bloodthirsty. It feels it's a war, not a sense of citizenry, united, e pluribus unum, amongst the many one. It feels like a winner takes all dynamic that has evolved in this election. And I don't say it's simply based on one side or the other. The whole culture of this election, this 4 years perhaps, has been based on this. Again, I have my opinions where that's come from, but that's where we're at. And the question is, it will be over today, a few days, a few weeks. It will be over eventually. And when it's over, we will be like Sarah. We will have to deal with the trauma of what happened. And will we be able to reunite Abraham, Yitzchak, Sarah, and be one family again? Or, as the Torah describes, sadly, Sarah, as I mentioned, likelihood became depressed, anxious, dies, and even Yitzchak himself, who is called Pachad Yitzchak, the fear of Yitzchak, his life is defined by the depth of the fear, the experience, so traumatic for him. He lives a life, as you read his story, where the fear, the trauma, the upset defines who he is. He's a quiet figure, not a assertive, strong figure. He's a weaker figure, as we can imagine, defined by this moment, understandably. Our country can decide now, our citizenry, what can we do after this is over to try to build what our first motto of our country was, that sense of e pluribus unum, that we can come together and unite about what binds us together. That when challenges happen, God forbid there may be a few, but hurricanes, wars, I'm not going to ask fellow soldiers, are you from a red state or from a blue state? Did you vote for this person, that person? We are all one. That's what makes us Americans. Not your skin color, your religion, your economic class, whether you're college educated or not. We're all one. And that's going to be the job of what happens after today. In a sense, not to follow what the Torah is teaching us and saying, watch out. It could lead to the death of Sarah and sadness. But actually the greatness of the Torah, which leads us to the Exodus story, where we come out, a mixed multitude of people, but bound as one towards a journey towards the promised land. That is the vision, Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated, is that we're all trying to get to the promised land. We have different visions how to get there, but we can agree to love each other as Americans, to love our neighbors as ourselves, and to find a way together to reweave the fabric of our country so that we don't take up knives, God forbid, to threaten each other, but we look for ways to hug each other. That is the religious mission after this is over. That is, in a sense, the message of what happens after the Akedah. I wish everyone a meaningful, safe day. Please, God, vote. It is a mitzvah to do so, a commandment to offer your voice, but also regardless of what happens, regardless. Let's think in what ways are we going to hold each other and reunite after this is over. Boker Tov. May God bless our country, the United States of America.